She said, "We deserve better than a backyard," and pulled the tablecloth off my father's workbench like it was a rag. I didn't argue. I just walked to the garage, picked up my phone, and made one call that ended her engagement party before dessert. I don't take it for granted that you're here with me right now. Before I tell you what happened in that garage, tell me where you're watching from. City, state, country. Leave it below. Parts of this story have been shaped for clarity and impact. Resemblance to any name or place is coincidental. I spent 38 years building cabinets with these two hands. Kitchens, dressers, a rocking chair for every grandbaby born into this family since 1994. I know the weight of good oak before I even pick up the saw. I know when a piece of wood is going to warp on me and when it's going to hold. That Thursday evening, standing in my workshop with a folded sheet of paper in my hand, I felt a different kind of weight. The paper my son's fiancée had just handed my wife was a list of demands 12 pages long, and I had never in 65 years of living seen anything quite like it. Brittany came by the shop at 6 o'clock sharp, smelling like a candle store, her ring catching the light every time she moved her hand, which was often. She smiled the way people smile when they've never had to ask twice for anything. "Walt," she said, holding the papers out toward my wife like she was handing over a warranty card. "I just need you and Walt to handle the arch and the tables. You're the only ones who could actually build something like this. Nobody does woodwork like you two." My wife Ruth took the papers. She looked through them slow, the way she looks through everything. Patient, careful. The same hands that raised two kids and buried her own mother without ever once raising her voice. I stood next to her and read over her shoulder. The pages were typed in a small, tidy font. A 10-foot wedding arch with hand-carved lattice. 60 place settings built from reclaimed barnwood. A cake table shaped like a hexagon. A photo backdrop with real ivy trained through a custom trellis. Each item had a note beside it. Must be finished by the 15th. Must match the venue's color palette. Must be delivered, not picked up. Something tightened low in my chest. Not anger yet. Something colder than anger. Ruth looked up from the pages. Her voice came out soft, the way she talks to a customer who doesn't quite understand what they're asking for. "Brittany, honey, this is a lot of building. When's the engagement party?" Brittany waved a hand like the date was someone else's problem to track. 2 weeks. It's not a big deal, Ruth. You two do this kind of thing all the time. This is basically just bigger versions of what's already in your garage. I looked at my son, Marcus. He was standing behind her, eyes down on his phone, thumb moving across the screen like the screen held the only oxygen in the room. His jaw was set in a way I recognized because I used to wear that same jaw at his age, before a good woman, and about a decade of getting it wrong taught me to unlearn it. Ruth folded the papers back along their crease. "Okay," she said. Just that. One word. No argument, no sharp breath. The same word she'd used for 39 years whenever life handed her something heavy and expected her to carry it quietly. Brittany's smile went from pleased to triumphant, dressed up as gratitude. "You two are the best. Marcus, didn't I tell you they'd say yes?" Marcus glanced up long enough to nod. "Yeah, told you." They left 12 minutes later. The screen door on the shop banged shut behind them. Too loud for a Thursday evening. Too final for what it was supposed to be. I stood in the workshop holding those 12 pages. I read them again slower. 10-foot arch, 60 barnwood settings, hexagon cake table, custom trellis with real ivy woven through by hand, which meant somebody had to find live ivy, keep it alive, and weave it without breaking the stems, 2 weeks before an October wedding season when every florist in 3 counties was already booked solid. From the back of the shop I heard Ruth moving lumber, counting boards, checking her stock in that quiet internal way of hers I've never fully understood but have always trusted. I walked back and found her standing over the barnwood pile, reading glasses pushed up her nose, both hands running along the grain like she was taking inventory before a storm. "Ruthie," I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant it. "We don't have to do this." She straightened and turned. No self-pity in her face, no anger, just that look she's had for 4 decades, steady and clear all the way through. "It's Marcus's engagement, Walt." She reached for her coat off the hook by the door. "We need to get to the lumber yard before Denny closes up." I took the coat and helped her into it, the way I've done 10,000 times. Then I looked at the clock above the workbench. 6:40. Denny's closed at 9. I grabbed my keys and followed my wife out into the Ohio evening. The streetlights ran past the windshield in long amber streaks while I drove us out past the county line. Ruth sat in the passenger seat with the pages on her lap, pen already working, circling measurements, converting inches to feet, solving it like a puzzle instead of what it actually was, which was a trap dressed up as a favor. After about 10 miles, I couldn't hold it in anymore. She planned this on purpose, you know. 2 weeks' notice, 12 pages, all those specifications. That's not a request, Ruthie. That's a test. Ruth didn't look up from the page. I know, she said. Then why are we driving to Denny's at 7 o'clock at night? She circled something with her pen and looked over at me with the eyes that have seen through every version of me for 40 years. Because Marcus didn't plan this, Walt. Marcus is marrying someone he loves. That's the only part I care about right now. I didn't have an answer for that, so I drove. Denny's yard had most of the reclaimed barnwood, but we were short on the wide boards for the hexagon table, and the ivy trellis needed cedar, not pine, or it wouldn't hold the moisture without cracking. We drove 40 minutes to a specialty yard outside Millbrook that Denny said might carry it. It was nearly 9:30 by the time we found the last of what we needed and loaded the truck bed under a sky gone fully dark. I watched Ruth move through that lumber yard the way she's moved through our life together for 4 decades. Patient, exact, refusing to let any obstacle outweigh the thing she was trying to build. She's had arthritis in both hands for 6 years now, and she never once mentioned it in that yard. We got home at 10:40. The receipt in the glove box read $490, most of it savings. Ruth had been setting aside for a new sewing machine. I folded it and said nothing. By 11, she had her work apron on, the one with the tape measure pocket, and the shop lights were on bright over the bench. 14 hours until Brittany wanted a finished arch delivered to the venue. I pulled a stool up to the workbench and started sanding the barnwood pieces she cut, because standing too long tears up my lower back, something 38 years of hunching over a table saw will do to a man. Around midnight, Ruth looked over at me with sawdust on her glasses and said, "You know what I keep thinking about?" "Tell me." The summer Marcus was 12. He came into the shop on a Saturday, nowhere to be, and just started sweeping sawdust off the floor. Nobody asked him to. She smiled down at the board in front of her, not at me. I didn't say anything for a long while because I didn't want to break whatever she was inside of. I laughed, low and tired, but real. He used to beg to run the shop vac, thought it was the greatest machine ever built, and then one day he stopped asking. She slid a length of cedar into the clamp and kept working without losing rhythm. I handed her the next board, and the shop filled with the smell of fresh-cut wood, sharp and clean, the smell that's followed me my whole life. That smell took me back the way smells do, faster than thinking. I remembered the first time Brittany walked into our shop, maybe 5 years back, before she and Marcus were anything. She'd come in with her father looking for a headboard, and she'd run her hand along a maple dresser like she actually understood what she was touching. Ruth liked her right away. Told Marcus about her before he even knew her name. Marcus had shrugged the way he did at 26 when he wasn't ready to be interested in anything yet. There was also the time, a couple years later, when Brittany came by needing a picture frame fixed for her grandmother's photograph, and she didn't have her wallet on her. Ruth told her not to worry about it. Come back when she could. I remember Ruth saying that evening, laughing a little while she set the table. She was so embarrassed. Told her it happens to everybody. She never brought it up again after that. I was still sitting with that memory when Brittany's name lit up on the phone screen on the workbench. Ruth was elbow deep in wood glue, so I glanced over out of habit. The preview read, "Oh, almost forgot." Something in my chest went very still. Ruth wiped her hands on a rag, picked up the phone, read it without any change in her face, and set it back down face first before returning to the clamp she was tightening. I reached over and turned it face up myself. "Oh, almost forgot. The arch needs uplighting built into the base. My planner says it's non-negotiable for the photos. Can you figure that out tonight? Thanks so much." Electrical wiring built into a wooden arch, requested at midnight with an exclamation point, like she was asking Ruth to grab an extra loaf of bread on the way home. My back teeth pressed together hard enough to ache. I stood up slow, one hand on the bench, because my spine doesn't negotiate at this hour, and I went and got Ruth a fresh cup of coffee off the burner in the corner. Set it down next to her without a word. She wrapped both hands around it without stopping the work, the way you reach for something you've been reaching for your whole life. We didn't talk about the message. There wasn't anything the silence between us wasn't already saying better. I don't remember exactly when I fell asleep sitting up on that stool, but what pulled me back was a short, sharp sound, quickly swallowed, like someone catching their breath wrong. My eyes opened. The shop clock read 4:20. Ruth was standing at the drill press with her back to me, her right hand pressed flat against her left forearm, the way you press when something's cut you. I was on my feet before I was fully awake, my back screaming at the sudden movement, and I crossed the shop in 4 strides. Ruthie, let me see. It's nothing, Walt. Let me see. She turned her hand over. A thin, angry line ran across 2 knuckles where the drill bit had skated off the wood and caught her. Not deep, but bleeding steady. Sit down, I said. I can't sit down. I have the ivy to weave before the trellis dries. The ivy can wait 30 seconds. Sit. She sat. I found the first aid kit, wrapped her hand, and pressed a clean rag against it until the bleeding slowed. Her face was tired in a way that goes past tired, the kind that lives down in the bones. "Why didn't you wake me?" I asked, my voice rougher than I meant. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "You looked peaceful, Walt." I held that rag against her hand and felt something crack quiet in the middle of my chest. She'd been standing at that bench since 11 at night, letting me doze on a stool like a man who'd earned his rest. And she cut herself weaving ivy through cedar lattice at 4 in the morning, and her first thought was that I'd looked peaceful. I made her switch to a cold cloth, told her to stay put, and went station by station myself. The arch frame was solid, dried, ready for the ivy. The barnwood settings were cut and stacked. The hexagon table just needed its final joints glued and clamped. My back was grinding at the base of the spine the way it does by hour 6 of standing. The kind of ache 38 years of bent-over cabinetry builds up slow and invisible until one day it's all you can think about. What I was thinking about while I stood at that bench in the 4:30 dark was the winter of 2009, when the recession hit and nobody in 3 counties was ordering custom furniture. Ruth sat at our kitchen table with the business ledger, the physical one she's always kept, and I watched her face go through the numbers. She never cried about it. She just got very quiet, which was worse. She called me from the shop on a Tuesday that March. "Walt," she said, "I think we need to close it down." I sat with her voice in my ear for a long moment. "No," I said. "Walt, the numbers don't. That shop is yours. It's been yours for 15 years. I'll pick up extra installation jobs as long as my back holds. Don't close it." She was quiet a long time. Then she said, "Okay." I started taking every side job I could find after that, sometimes 16-hour days hanging cabinets in other men's kitchens. I never told her how bad my back got that year. I just came home, ate what she'd kept warm, and went to bed. The shop's still open. That's what matters. I was gluing the last joint on the hexagon table when I heard Ruth behind me. "Walt, come look at this." She was standing at the little stovetop we keep in the shop office, stirring something in a saucepan I hadn't seen her start. The smell hit me before I saw it. Hot cider, the real kind, simmered down with cinnamon sticks and orange peel. "That's not on the list," I said. "No," Ruth said. "It's not." She pulled a bag of small paper cups from the cabinet. "Marcus used to come out here every year around this time when he was a boy, freezing, sawdust in his hair, and I'd have this waiting, 3rd grade, 4th grade, every October." She didn't look at me while she said it. "I'm putting a thermos of it by the arch tomorrow, near where he'll be standing." She didn't say anything else about it. She didn't need to. Outside, the first gray light was showing at the edges of the shop window. The clock read 6:50. Ruth stood back and looked at everything she'd built through that night. The arch, the ivy, trained through every rung of the trellis, 60 barnwood place settings, stacked and labeled, the hexagon table, the little jury-rigged uplighting I'd wired in myself around 5A, because I couldn't let her climb a ladder with a cut hand. 9 hours, I said. 9 hours, she agreed. I picked my keys up off the bench. The venue wasn't going to load itself. My truck bed can hold a lot, but not everything at once. So it took 3 trips out to the Hendersons' event barn, 20 minutes outside town, a rustic place with good bones and a big gravel lot. I am 65 years old with a lower back that's been staging its own slow rebellion for the better part of a decade, and hauling a 10-foot ark out of a truck bed alone at 7 in the morning is not a dignified operation. I was on my third trip, wrestling the hexagon table toward the barn doors, when I heard a truck door slam behind me. Walter Reyes. The voice came across the gravel lot like a warm hand on the shoulder. What in God's name are you doing hauling that thing by yourself? I turned. Big Sam Delgado, who's run the feed store 2 towns over for 30 years, and calls me every Sunday out of a habit left over from when our boys played Little League together. He was standing by his truck in his work boots, coffee thermos in hand. Marcus's engagement party, I said. Tonight. I heard about the list, Sam said, walking over. My wife heard from your wife's cousin. 12 pages, Walt? He looked at the arch, the trellis, all of it. Get up off that gravel before your back gives out for good. I'm grabbing the other end. I told him everything while we worked. The list, the 2 lumber yards, Ruth's hand, the uplighting request at midnight. Sam listened the way men of his generation listen, which is to say without interrupting, without waiting for his turn. When I finished, he just shook his head slow. That girl's got some nerve. Then, quieter. She's about to be family, though. Yeah, I said. We left it there. By 9:30, we had the arch standing, the ivy catching the morning light, the tables set with the barnwood settings arranged just how Ruth had sketched it on a notepad at 2 in the morning. It wasn't a 5-star ballroom. It was a gravel lot outside a feed barn in rural Ohio with reclaimed wood and hand-woven ivy and a thermos of cider warming near the arch. I stood back and decided it was going to be enough. My phone rang at 10. Marcus's name on the screen. I could see Ruth through the barn window, still in her work apron, her bandaged hand reaching up to straighten the trellis one more time. Hey, Dad, everything on track over there? The question landed the way a stone lands in still water. Small, but the rings go out a long way. I kept my eyes on my wife's bandaged hand through that window. Yeah, son, I said. Everything's on track. Great. See you at 4. He hung up before I could say anything else, which was fine. There wasn't anything else that would have done either of us any good right then. At 1 o'clock, Ruth called me in. The last piece was done. We stood together at the barn doors looking at what she'd built. The arch, the ivy, 60-place settings, the cake table waiting for the baker's delivery, steam still curling faintly off the thermos of cider in the October air. I took her bandaged hand carefully, 2 fingers around the good part of her wrist. Ruthie, it's beautiful. She looked at it a long moment, then leaned her head against my shoulder, quiet, the way she does when she's too tired for words. At 3:50, I heard tires on the gravel out front. Marcus and Brittany, 10 minutes early. Comment Ruth if you're still here, because in about 60 seconds, everything my wife built through that night is about to mean nothing to the people it was built for. Some elements of this story have been shaped for clarity. What happened in that barn may not be word for word, but the hurt behind it is real enough. In 65 years of building things with my hands, I've learned that people show you who they are in the first 10 seconds, not who they want you to think they are, who they actually are. You see it in how they walk into a room you built for them. Brittany came through the barn doors first, phone already up, filming. She scanned the arch, the tables, the trellis, the way an inspector scans a building for code violations. Quick, thorough, hunting for the flaw. She didn't call out for Ruth. She didn't say a word to either of us. She walked the length of the room taking video, narrating quietly to herself, then stopped in front of the arch and frowned at the uplighting wiring I'd run along the base, the wiring I'd built at 5 in the morning with a bandaged wife asleep on a bench behind me. This wiring's exposed, she said, more to her phone than to us. It looks cheap. Her mother arrived at 4 sharp. Deb Whitfield came through the gravel lot in heels that had no business on gravel, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, and stopped just inside the barn with her head tilted at a precise angle. Oh, she said, to Brittany, not to me. How rustic. She smiled when she said it, but the smile stopped exactly at her cheekbones. Marcus's future father-in-law shook my hand, firm and dry. Quite a setup, Walt. Ruth outdid herself. She did, I said. By 4:15, the barn was filling. Marcus's co-workers, Brittany's sorority sisters, family from both sides, maybe 70 people total, all of them finding their seats among the barnwood settings Ruth had cut, with a cut hand at 4 in the morning. I saw Brittany huddle with her mother near the drink table, heads close, voices low. I didn't hear the words, but I saw Brittany's face while she said them. Careful and flat in the way faces are when they're being careful on purpose. At 4:30, Brittany picked up a champagne glass and tapped it twice with a spoon. The barn went quiet the way rooms go quiet when people feel a shift before they understand it. She stood in the center under the arch, shoulders back, chin level, a smile so wide it could have been framed. "Everyone," she said, her voice carrying easy across the barn, "I have a little announcement. We've actually decided to move the toast and dinner over to Cattleman's Steakhouse in town. I booked their private room. It's honestly so much nicer, and Marcus and I feel like tonight deserves the best." She spread her hands, a gesture of generous presentation. "It starts at 6, so we should probably head out soon." She turned to Ruth, standing near the drink table with her bandaged hand tucked slightly behind her back. "You can leave all this up, of course. We'll figure out what to do with it later." Her smile didn't waver by a single degree. 3 seconds of absolute stillness. Then a chair scraped gravel. Then another. Then the low rumble of 70 people remembering somewhere else to be. Deb Whitfield squeezed my arm on her way out. "Lovely setup, Walt," she said, not looking at me. Marcus walked past close enough that I could have reached out and stopped him. He didn't look at my face. He looked at the ground the same way he'd looked at his phone the night before, like the gravel was the safest thing in the room. I did not stop him. The barn doors opened and closed, opened and closed. Within 4 minutes, it was just me, Ruth, and Sam, who'd stayed to help stack extra chairs, standing in a barn built for 70 that now held 3 people and an arch nobody stood under, 60-place settings nobody sat at, and a thermos of cider going cold near a base of wiring somebody called cheap. There are sounds you don't forget. Gravel under retreating tires. The particular silence that settles into a room. A woman spent 9 hours filling with something made by hand. I found Ruth in the barn office 10 minutes later. Her work apron was folded on the desk, neat, precise, the ties tucked under, exactly the way she folds it at the end of every day in the shop, even now, even after this. She was sitting with her face in both hands, her shoulders moving. The sound she made barely a sound at all, small and compressed, the kind of crying a person does when they've spent a lifetime not wanting to be heard doing it. I pulled a chair beside her and put my hand flat on her back between her shoulder blades and left it there. "Walt," she said, and her voice broke on my name. I cut my hand at 4 in the morning and I kept going. She pressed her lips together, fighting the next part, then let it come anyway. "I thought if I just built it right enough, if every joint was perfect, she couldn't finish." "I know, Ruthie." She didn't even look at the wiring long enough to say thank you for it working. Not once. "I know." "And Marcus," her chin dropped. "That boy used to fall asleep in the sawdust under my bench when he was small enough to fit under there." "I know," I said, and I did. I knew every version of Marcus she was seeing right then. The toddler who learned to walk holding the leg of that same bench. The boy sweeping floors nobody asked him to sweep. The 12-year-old who thought the shop vac was the greatest machine ever built. That boy had walked out of this barn 20 minutes ago without looking back once. After a while, she straightened up and wiped her face with the back of her wrist. "I keep thinking about that cider," she said. "I don't even know why I made it. He hasn't gotten cold out here in 15 years. I got up, found a rag to hand her, and my hand brushed against something tucked into the office desk drawer, folded soft along an old crease. A sheet of notebook paper, a kid's handwriting, careful and large. I pulled it out and read it standing there. "My dad builds things that last forever. That's what I want to do when I grow up." Marcus, age 9. Some old-school project Ruth had kept in the shop for reasons I'd never asked about until right then. I folded it and put it in my shirt pocket, against my chest. Then I looked out at the barn, through the office window. The arch, the ivy, the 60 settings, nobody had touched. Something was forming in me that wasn't quite grief and wasn't quite anger, but was made of both and something harder underneath. I'm not a social media man. I have a Facebook account my grandson set up for me 4 years back, and I use it to wish people happy birthday about 6 times a year. That's the whole of my presence online. But I walked back into that barn with my phone and started taking pictures. because somebody needed to, and I was the only one left to do it. I photographed the arch straight on, the ivy woven tight through every rung, the 60-place settings in one long row, the thermos of cider still steaming faintly by the base. Ruth came to the office doorway while I was crouched, getting the angle right on the cake table. "Walt, what are you doing?" "Taking pictures." "Why?" "Because somebody should." She studied my face a moment, then went back to the office, which meant she understood something even if she didn't have the words for it yet. My phone rang. Sam's name on the screen. He calls most evenings. Has for 20 years, ever since our boys were in scouts together. "Walt, how'd the party go?" I told him everything. The list, the all-night build, Ruth's hand, Brittany's announcement, the gravel lot emptying out. Sam was quiet long enough. I checked to see if the call had dropped. "Post it," he said. "All of it. Every word." "Every word, Sam?" "Every word. Say exactly what you told me. Don't soften it." A pause. "And then invite people out. That build deserves better than an empty barn." I typed for 10 minutes, deleted it twice, started again, and then stopped editing and read it through one time and hit post before the part of me that softens things could catch up. My wife Ruth is 61 years old. She's run a woodworking shop with me for 30 years. Last night she spent 9 hours and cut her own hand building a wedding arch, 60-place settings, and a cake table for our son's engagement party on 2 weeks' notice. Tonight the bride's family looked at it, took photos for the album, and left for a steakhouse instead. Nobody sat at a single seat. If you're near Route 9 outside Millbrook and you want to see some real handmade woodwork before we tear it down, come on out. There's hot cider. Everybody's welcome. 4 photographs attached. The arch, the ivy, the long row of place settings. Ruth's bandaged hand resting on the cake table, posted at 5:11 in the evening. I went and found Ruth folding the last of the extra linens. I invited some folks out. She looked up. "How many, Walt?" "However many come." She looked at me a long moment. Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile, but the place just before one, where something decides to come back to life. "Then I better make sure that cider doesn't run out," she said, and went to check the burner. My phone buzzed on the workbench. 1 notification, then 3. Then the screen just started saying 99 plus. The first truck pulled into the gravel lot at 5:40. A man in his 40s I'd never met. A little girl with her hand in his, pigtails, juice stain on her shirt. "This the place from the Post?" he asked. "It is. Come on in." He looked at the arch, the tables, all 60 settings still holding their shape. "Sir," he said, his voice dropping, "your wife built all this?" "She did." He shook his head slow. "Then we're honored to be here." Sam arrived 7 minutes later in his old Ford, parked half up on the gravel shoulder the way he always does, and hugged me hard enough that something in my chest that had been locked up since 4:30 came loose a little. "You did right," he said into my shoulder, then looked at the barn. "Where do you need me?" They kept coming. A young couple who'd seen Sam's share of the Post and driven over from 2 towns away. 3 of Marcus's old friends from high school who hadn't been invited to the party but showed up anyway once they saw it online, sat at the barnwood settings and thanked Ruth by name on their way out. An older man in a worn coat who walked up the gravel road on foot and stood at the entrance like he wasn't sure he was allowed in. "Come in," I told him. "Everyone's welcome. I don't want to impose. You'd be doing us a favor. My wife built enough for 70 people. Help us make a dent." He came in. Ruth filled a plate herself and carried it to him personally. He didn't say much, but on his way out he stopped and said, "Tell your wife thank you. I mean it." I watched him walk back up the gravel road and felt something settle in my chest that wasn't triumph, wasn't satisfaction exactly, something quieter, a thing being used for the purpose it was built for, after almost being wasted entirely. By 6:30 the barn was full again, different faces, kids running between the tables, somebody's teenager helping Sam carry folding chairs without being asked. I found a spot by the doors and watched Ruth work the room, pouring cider, answering questions about the ivy weave with the same patient warmth she gives every stranger who walks into our shop for the first time. Her bandaged hand moved as easy as the good one. Her face had something in it I hadn't seen all day, something lit from underneath the exhaustion. 30 years of building things for other people's kitchens and living rooms. most of them never learning my name past the invoice. People pick up their custom pieces. People drive them home. That's the job. But tonight people had read 4 paragraphs on a phone screen and driven out to a gravel lot to sit at my wife's tables and drink her cider. Then my phone rang, Brittany's name glowing on the screen. I let it ring twice, not to make her wait, but because I needed those 2 seconds to decide how I was going to answer. Walter. Her voice was the temperature of a freezer left open. Nobody calls me Walter except my late mother, and she's been gone 11 years. I need you to take that post down right now. Hello, Brittany. This is humiliating for this entire family. Do you understand what's happening? People are tagging us. My mother's getting messages. Take it down. I let her finish. 30 years of watching wood, you learn that a piece under this much pressure needs to finish cracking before you can do anything useful with it. Ruth's still pouring cider, I said. Come on out if you want some. A pause. Are you serious right now? I'm always serious about cider, Brittany. You know that about me. Her voice cracked at the edges, anger pushing through the careful surface. Marcus is getting calls from people he's never even met. Someone left a review on Cattleman's page. This is out of control. What did it say? That's not the point. What did it say, Brittany? A longer pause. It said a family walked out on a handmade wedding setup to eat steak instead, and that the steak wasn't even that good. Well, I said, that's accurate. She made a sound that was either a laugh or something that had given up trying to be one. Walt, please just take it down. We can fix this. Marcus will come by tomorrow. I'm going to go back to my guests now. Your guests? You invited strangers to a wedding venue that isn't even yours. I invited people who wanted to see good work and eat a warm meal. That's what my wife does. That's what she's always done. I looked out toward the barn, toward the noise and the light. The post stays up. Come eat or don't. I need to go. I hung up. She called back 4 times over the next 20 minutes. I didn't answer. What I learned later from Sam, who learned it from his daughter, who apparently tracks these things closely, was that my post had been shared past 3,000 times by 9 that night, and that Cattleman's review page had picked up a wave of 1-star reviews, most of them mentioning Ruth by name in her favor. Marcus called at 7:40. I was sitting on the tailgate of my truck, half a plate of cider-warmed cake in hand, when his name lit up my screen. I pulled the phone up and let it ring once before answering. Hey, Dad. His voice was careful, not angry. Careful, the voice of a man who's just looked at something that doesn't add up and is trying to figure out if he read it right. Marcus. A pause. People keep tagging me in this post. I know. Did something happen? Like, is the post real or, it's real. I posted it. The silence on his end lasted a full 3 seconds. I counted them. You posted it, he said. That's right. Dad, can we talk about this? Because Brittany and her family, they're really upset. And your mother cut her hand at 4 in the morning weaving ivy through a trellis for your engagement, I said, keeping my voice level. When you walked out of that barn, you walked past 60 place settings she built with that same hand. A beat. You didn't look at a single one of them. The line went quiet. I hear you, he said finally. I do, but taking this public isn't going to fix. I'm not trying to fix anything tonight, son. Good night. I hung up. What I know about the weeks that followed, I pieced together from things Marcus eventually told me and things Ruth heard from her sister, who talks to Deb Whitfield at church. Marcus and Brittany had their first real fight, not the surface kind, the kind where you finally look at what something actually cost and realize you've been taking somebody's labor for granted your whole life. Brittany's mother stopped answering Ruth's calls entirely for 2 weeks. And somewhere in a bedroom across town, something else was happening that I didn't know about until later. Marcus's little cousin Ellie, 16, who'd been at the party and left with everyone else, got sent the post by a friend who hadn't even been there. She read it alone in her room at 11 at night, the way you read something hoping it says something different the second time through. She stopped at the line about the cut hand. Nobody had told her about that. She hadn't known. The card came in the mail on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the party. Plain envelope, my name on the front in careful handwriting. Inside, 1 line in blue pen. Uncle Walt, I saw the pictures of the arch. I should have stayed. I'm sorry, Ellie. I read it standing at my mailbox. then folded it once and put it in my shirt pocket, right next to the note Marcus had written at 9 years old about things that last forever. 2 days after that, on a Thursday, Ruth called me from the shop. "Walt, Marcus is here." "What do you mean he's there?" "I mean he walked in 20 minutes ago and started sanding a board without asking what it was for." A pause. "He looks like he hasn't slept right in a week." "What did you do?" "What do you think I did?" I made him cider. I sat in my truck on the side of the road and felt something ease in my chest that had been tight since 4:30 that Saturday. "I'll let you two talk," I said. "That's what I figured," Ruth said, and hung up. What happened at that bench I got in pieces, some from Ruth that evening, some from Marcus later. Ruth had set the cider mug down in front of him without a word, the same recipe she'd made every October since he was small. Marcus looked at it, then at his mother, and his eyes were full, not spilling yet, but full, the way eyes get right before the last wall comes down. "Mom," he said, and his voice cracked down the middle of it. "I didn't know about your hand. Nobody told me. I just walked out, and I didn't even—" His voice gave out. Ruth sat down on the stool next to him, not across from him, and took both his hands in hers, her bandaged one still faintly pink at the knuckles. "I know, baby. I know you didn't. I should have stayed. I should have said something. You're here now," Ruth said. "That's what counts." She squeezed his hands once. "You were 29 and following the current that day. The question is what 30 does, and 35, and every year after." Marcus wiped his face with the back of his wrist. "Is there something I can do? I don't want to just say sorry and leave it there." Ruth studied him a moment, the way she studies a joint before deciding it's ready to hold weight. "You start Saturday," she said. 7 a.m. Don't be late." He wasn't late. He showed up at 6:50 with sawdust already on his boots from somewhere. Sanded every barnwood offcut in the shop without checking his phone once, which Ruth told me later was the thing that impressed her most. What Brittany did, I learned mostly from Ruth, who heard it from Marcus, who was there. Brittany showed up at the shop alone on a Thursday afternoon 2 weeks after that, and stood in the doorway for a long moment before she came in. "Mrs. Reyes," she said, "I don't know how to apologize for what I did." Ruth set down the plane she was working with and pulled a stool out for her. "Sit," she said, something she almost never does mid-shift, because there's always something needing doing in that shop, and sitting is the thing that waits. "I liked you the first time you walked in here," Ruth told her. "You ran your hand along that maple dresser like you actually understood wood. I told Marcus about you before he even knew your name. I need you to be that person again. That person I can work with," Brittany cried. Ruth handed her a rag, the same kind she hands anybody who needs one in that shop, and let her sit there until she was done. The following Saturday, Brittany showed up at 7, earlier than Marcus had on his first day. Ruth handed her sandpaper and pointed at a stack of unfinished chair legs. "Start at the top, work your way down the grain," she said. "Like this? Like that." She worked the whole shift without stopping. Marcus found the bottle of prescription-strength ibuprofen on my workbench about a month after the party, the kind the doctor gave me 8 months back for a spine that 38 years of hunched-over cabinetry had worn down to bone on bone. He held it up. "Dad, how long has your back been this bad?" "Long enough, son." "That's not an answer. 5 years, give or take." He set the bottle down careful, like it weighed more than it did. 5 years, and you've never said anything. "Bills don't stop, Marcus. I want you to see a real specialist. I'll pay for it. I'm not asking, Dad. I'm telling you." He'd already looked up a spine doctor in Columbus. "You're going." I went. "Degenerative disc disease at 2 levels, the doctor said. The kind 38 years of leaning over a workbench builds slow, until one day it's the only thing you can think about. No more full days on my feet at the table saw, short stretches only. On the drive home, Marcus was quiet a long time. Then, "Let me take some of the shop work off you and Mom. Not to run it, just to carry what you shouldn't be carrying anymore. Ask." That evening, Ruth put coffee in front of me at the kitchen table. "Well, doctor says I need to stop the long days at the bench. And Marcus wants to help, for real this time." Ruth looked at her coffee a long moment, then up at me, her eyes steady and warm and very tired in the way good things feel tired after a long road. "Pastime, Walt," she said. 6 weeks after the party, on a regular Friday with no occasion at all, Ruth made her usual dinner: pot roast and cornbread. 3 things. Nothing fancy. Marcus came through the door, still in his work clothes, and went straight to the cutting board without being asked. Brittany came in behind him carrying a dish of something she'd made herself. A little under-seasoned. Not a great dish by any measure. And I ate the whole plate and told her so. Honestly, which was the first time I'd said her name without anything sharp behind it in weeks. Ellie showed up too, apron from the shop folded under one arm, carrying a small carved trivet she'd sanded herself that week. "I made this," she said. "The edge is still a little rough on one side." Ruth turned it over in her hands, looked at it the way she looks at any work in progress, honestly. "It'll smooth out. Put it on the table." We sat down, all 5 of us, the pot roast going around, the cornbread, Brittany's dish, which Marcus praised without being asked to. I watched him refill her water glass without being asked. I watched Ruth's bandaged hand, healed down now to a thin, pale line across 2 knuckles that would fade by spring, resting easy around her coffee mug. I reached into my shirt pocket. 2 pieces of paper, one soft with age, one still crisp. I set them by the breadbasket where the light caught them clear. Marcus glanced over, then back at his plate. He didn't reach for them. He didn't need to. Outside, Ohio was doing what it does on a Friday in late October. Wind picking up, the last of the leaves letting go. The cornbread was warm, the pot roast was good, and Ellie's trivet was almost right. Not perfect yet, but we were working on it. I spent 65 years thinking that staying quiet was the same as keeping the peace. It isn't. Silence doesn't keep the peace. It just delays who has to pay for it. And in my family, that was always going to be Ruth. She built 60 place settings with a cut hand and never once asked to be thanked for it. That's not devotion. That's what happens when somebody spent too long believing love has to be proven in labor. I let that happen for a long time. I hung cabinets in other men's kitchens for 20 years and couldn't find the words to tell my own son, "See what your mother's carrying. Don't be me." If the people you love are holding more than their share, say something before the cider goes cold on a table nobody sits at. I don't talk much about faith, but standing in that barn at 5 in the afternoon with my wife's work going untouched and my phone in my hand, I believe the right people end up on the right gravel road at the right time. That man with the little girl in pigtails didn't find my post by accident. This is a grandpa story about family, about a woman whose hands built more love than her own family knew how to receive, and about a quiet man who decided enough was finally enough, without raising his voice once. If any part of this felt like your story, the silence, the empty barn, the table nobody sat at, leave a comment. Tell somebody who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is your sign. These are the stories worth telling, one Friday dinner at a time. Thank you for staying until the end. Some elements here are shaped for reflection and storytelling. If that's not for you, no hard feelings. Choose what feeds you. But if you're still here, I'll see you at the next one.